So a lot of you guys, if you're really into politics, have been following the situation that's been going on in Arizona. Basically, during the last governor's election, there were some shady things that happened, and it turns out that Katie Hobbs ended up winning that election over Kari Lake. Now, Kari Lake has been salty, and it's understandable to see why. A lot of shady things happened. I'm not going to get into all those in this video. But things looked very, very suspicious. And so Kari Lake has been fighting viciously ever since, I believe it was 2020 when the election actually took place. Ever since then, they've been fighting all these legal battles. And we now have the most recent victory. And this is a major victory because one thing that was at the forefront was there were some ballots, ballot boxes, some voting machines that mysteriously just stopped working in the major precincts in which Kari Lake was winning. And so everyone thought that was fishy, pretty much everyone, because you had all these long lines where the majority of Kari Lake's supporters were there to vote. And when they went to go vote, they couldn't because the machines they were going to use to vote stopped working. So now we have this new legislation that got passed that bans electronic voting machines in the entire 2024 race in Arizona. This is amidst, of course, Katie Hobbs trying to veto this legislation. So it's called Senate Concurrent Resolution 1037, prohibits counties from using EVMs that contain electronic components that are manufactured, assembled, or tested in foreign nations that pose a threat to the U.S. So it doesn't ban all electronic voting machines, just ones that were made using parts that are basically sourced in foreign countries, which basically means all of them because, I mean, who really makes electronics without using slave labor these days? So we have the quote here from the Arizona Senate Majority Leader, Sonny Borelli, who said, back in 2017, the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security issued a statement clearly designating elections infrastructure as critical interference, which means these electronic systems must have safeguards in place to prevent any attacks which threaten our national security. So, I mean, it seems very simple. Very, very simple legislation, very, very simple policy. I, for one, I'm happy about it, but I think the major downside is that, one good thing about these voting machines is that it makes it quicker and easier quicker to vote and easier to count up all the votes. Because since we can't do electronic voting, I would assume that not only will all the votes be cast by hand, they'll also have to be counted by hand. It could make the process of counting all those votes longer. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think it'll be, too much longer. Excuse me. At the end of the day, it'll be all right. I think the nice thing is you're not going to have any sort of fiasco where there's even a question about the election. Because, hey, if people are voting by hand, you don't really have any recourse to say, oh, they cheated because of the ballots. We saw Donald Trump come out with all of these claims in 2020 about the election and how it was rigged. You got all those thousands of mules and, dumping ballots and all of these things. You kind of get rid of that the more that you simplify the voting process. And this sort of does that. So if Kari Lake does this and loses, then hey, she's got no one else that she can blame but herself. But now all this does is take away the excuses that losers in these elections can use to complain about elections. Now, I feel like, this is making Katie Hobbs look really bad. And, a lot of Democrats have been doing this too, where they've been going oh, well, we can't, simplify our process or put in these safeguards to protect our elections because that disenfranchises voters. In the face of a lot of deficiencies in some of these elections, this just makes them seem like they don't want the elections to be secure, even if that's not true. I think in general there just needs to be a move to take away any claim that these folks who have lost elections can use to say that the elections were illegitimate. Because if Donald Trump says, oh, I lost just because they dumped all these ballots in very specific places, then change that system up so that people can still vote But also, Trump can't use that excuse again in 2024. Like, that just seems like a winning strategy to me. But some of these people are just bent on using this new method of voting specifically because it benefited them this time around, which I don't think is right or the best thing to do. But this is just how they decided to do it. So, it is what it is. But it is nice to see, at least in Arizona, some things changing.